Thanks for tuning in to a special Build with DIMO. I'm Rob, one of the co-founders of DIMO and CEO of Digital Infrastructure Inc. And we have our friend Jason from Daylight here. Jason, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Rob, and super excited to be teaming up with you guys. Started my career in the energy space, investment banking, covering energy and power, moved into private equity, investing in energy infrastructure. And in my time there, it became pretty evident to me what a lot of people are talking about now, which is rapid expansion of energy demand. And how do we meet that coming demand in a way that ensures grid reliability, that ensures lower energy costs for people, not higher energy costs, and more just resiliency throughout the energy system in general. Have been super inspired by projects like DIMO, like Helium, and other deep ends in the space, and we're super excited to bring similar kind of community-owned infrastructure to the energy world.
And one thing I noticed about a lot of deep end projects is the founders tend to come from the industry that the deep end project is in, not necessarily just coming from crypto. And they have a very specific problem in mind, and their expertise is very helpful in that versus being crypto native and looking to solve problems in areas that they're not as experienced with. What was the genesis of the idea? When did crypto become part of that solution for you? Take us through the beginning of Daylight.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I have found that certainly the most successful deep end projects all are founded by people that have deep industry experience because these industries are complex. And what we're doing is a business model innovation, it's a community innovation, it's an infrastructure innovation, but you still have to have a deep, I think, understanding of the market you're tackling. And so my co-founders also have a very deep energy background. My co-founder Evan was a power trader for over a decade, was a very senior power trader at some of the largest firms in the US, then left to become a climate tech founder where he's founded a number of successful climate tech companies and now also invests part-time. I actually met Evan whenever I was in the early days of thinking about Daylight, and tokens and crypto were kind of an early piece of the vision. And the reason for that was been in crypto since probably 2017 personally, watched Helium emerge onto the scene and saw it as really one of the most interesting projects really since maybe Bitcoin and Ethereum of using tokens, using asset ledgers in a unique way to unlock some new primitive, in this case, expansion of an infrastructure network. And as I was studying energy, again, quite clear that we needed to find ways to meet all the coming energy demand. And building power grids in the traditional centralized way was not going to work anymore. So when you think about building traditional power grids, you build massive power plants out in the middle of nowhere. Then you build huge transmission systems that pipe those electrons for miles and miles across many different states, and then they get delivered to the end customer. But the problem is with all the regulatory red tape, with all the bureaucracy, with high interest rates, developing massive infrastructure projects like expanding the size of the transmission system is almost impossible today. But actually, there's an alternative to that, which is pushing generation, storage, and energy management to the edges of power grids and really starting to decentralize the energy stack. And so, kind of co locating intelligent energy management and generation and storage at the point of consumption, like on our houses and our small businesses all across the distribution grid. And by doing that, we can offset the need for trillions of dollars of infrastructure expansion. We also can coordinate those devices together to actively support the energy system in a way that makes it far more reliable and reduces the total cost of energy delivered to everyone on the system itself. And so as I studied helium, it became very clear that this was a really interesting new mechanism to incentivize people to contribute to some decentralized infrastructure network. And then as I saw, organizations like DIMO emerge and really validate that thesis, and that this is not just a one-off, but this is something that can be very effective. It helped me, really determine that this was the right way to go build infrastructure like this. So I met Evan, my co-founder, who was a power trader. He actually had been working on a similar concept for a number of years, and we decided to team up. And he brought in our third co-founder, Udit, who's our CTO, who was at Con Ed. He's a certified grid operator for New York ISO, has been very, very deep in energy grid management and power system management. And for the last few years, have been working on distributed energy software with Evan. So the three of us decided to team up and really start to tackle this problem and build decentralized energy in kind of this novel new way pioneered by DIMO and Helium and many others.
Yeah, that's interesting. You kind of say that. Were there any other previous pivots or versions of Daylight or versions that were less decentralized in the early days of DIMO? there were a couple different versions of DIMO beforehand. We were trying to build things that we would need DIMO to build, but DIMO did not exist, therefore we couldn't. So we started looking further up the stack. Then we started to, or further down the stack, and then we started to look at acquiring vehicle data and had a lot of trouble doing that, which kind of led us to DIMO. We were thinking about paying people cash for installing these devices and then
Yep.
mining helium at the same time, and realizing how to put everything together into the DIMO we have today. Was there an earlier version?
Actually, it's kind of unique. I would say we started off more decentralized with the vision of only building a decentralized network, and then decided, hey, we should go build more centralized tooling around the decentralized protocol to make this successful when we actually launch the protocol, because energy is quite complex. And so when we first started the business, the goal was to only launch the protocol and allow anyone to come build and scale around it. But what we realized is that energy is really just difficult. It's not the same deployer model as purchasing a radio and plugging it into an outlet, right? Solar and storage is expensive assets. You need financing typically. You need a professional installer that's a licensed electrician to install that equipment. You need inspectors that can go around and determine if you need to increase the efficiency of a home before you would do things like deploy solar and storage. And so there's a really complex, fragmented market today around how electrification and energy upgrades are put into homes and businesses. There's solar installers, some do batteries, some do not. There are electricians that don't do solar. There's insulation contractors to help increase energy efficiency. There's HVAC contractors to install intelligent HVAC systems and water heating systems. And none of these groups really communicate with each other because they're all local specialists and professionals in their own unique asset that they install. They don't really communicate with each other, and they don't collaborate with each other. And so what we decided to do last year was, kind of surveying the landscape and deciding if we really want Daylight to scale well in our core markets, we need to go and build a standardized software platform and marketplace of local installers to make it incredibly simple and much lower cost for users to access these energy upgrades. And so we actually launched that company earlier this year, where we now have a full service installation platform where users can come to Daylight. They can get solar and storage installed by local professionals that we vet and QA. They can get water heaters and HVAC upgrades that are intelligent and contribute back to the energy system through our platform. And so it really unites the experience together and ensures that when we launch the protocol later this year, it becomes super simple for users that want to contribute in deeper ways to contribute in those deeper ways.
Yeah,
So that's
that's
kind of
always
the journey of how we've pivoted through thinking through how a contribution to Daylight can work.
it's always tricky. We grapple with some similar things in terms of, okay, we want to just build a decentralized protocol, but maybe we need to help a bit with the hardware. Maybe we need to help a bit with the software connected vehicle. Maybe we need to help a bit with building out some of the use cases
Yep,
that are kind of that initial killer app. And it's like you only have so much, so many resources at your company can only do so many things at once. So
totally.
managing that is
I do,
always
I do think that's something that we will see emerge, right? Digital infrastructure launched what seems to me, the first marketplace on top of DIMO, the protocol, right? We've seen Helium launch the first MVNO on top of the Helium protocol. I think what we're starting to see is projects deciding to kind of dog food their ecosystems early to get that kind of early critical mass on the demand side, and then start to scale from there. So I think that's the way we'll see a lot of these projects get built going forward.
yeah, really. So long as you're clear about what your core competencies are versus what you're doing to
Right.
kickstart something else,
That's right.
and making sure you're smart about it. And it sounds like you kind of setting up a network of installers and not really having to bring them all in house. Not like you have like your own, 1,000 employees who work directly at the company who are doing it. Doing that makes a lot of sense. Um, we're DEMO, obviously. We care about cars, and especially with electrification. With fuel cars, you're out of gas, you just go get some fuel. But with electric cars, there's charging, and there's lots of different ways to go about it. And there's ways to kind of manage the charging cycle and habits of cars. Tell me about Daylight's plan and involvement in kind of the charging life cycle as we electrify houses and cars.
Totally. So, electric vehicles are obviously a big part of that equation we're talking about when we're talking about growing electricity demand. AI and compute is the sexy one that everybody wants to talk about, but electrification of transportation is a massive, massive, massive one as well. And we're seeing, already record numbers on, EV growth, and I'm sure that will continue into the future. I don't think that's slowing down anytime soon. And so all these EVs are bringing with them increasing energy demand. And if it's not coordinated intelligently, that demand is going to spiral reliability on power grids out of control very quickly. because these are different energy demand times than what power grids are used to serving. A quick example, right? Most people go home, they plug in their EV to charge at night. That's great. But if we get to penetration of 10, 20% of cars on the road as EVs, and they're all charging at night, all of a sudden the demand profile of what a home's energy consumption looks like will change drastically, because it'll be much higher at night than it's been over the life of the entire energy system. And so managing EV charging intelligently is going to be a very key component of ensuring that the grid of the future remains reliable, that it can serve all this new load, and that we can decentralize the energy system in an intelligent way. And so that looks like a few kind of interesting concepts. The basic one is just managed EV charging. So it's helping users intelligently charge at times where energy is the lowest cost in the energy system and rewarding them for doing so. So it's coordinating, hundreds of thousands of EVs together to ensure that they're all optimizing and charging at the correct times. A little bit, further down the road, we'll start to see things like vehicle to home and vehicle to grid, where the electricity stored in an EV's battery can actually be an asset. It can actually isolate the entire home, just like a power wall or a generator does today. And so that becomes really interesting whenever we can do things like totally remove a home's load from the energy system at peak times by using electricity stored in the battery of these EVs. All these things, though, rely on connectivity to the car and connectivity to the charging cycle. And so for us, we need a suite of APIs where the protocol can communicate with these charging schedules. They can get historical data on these charging schedules, and they can manage the charging cycles of the cars directly within the parameters that the user allows a protocol to control its charging cycle. And so, that's why we're so excited to build on DIMO. I think DIMO's built an incredibly useful developer platform for people like us to come in and build, one of the first energy applications on the network, and use those APIs to manage those charging cycles within the parameters that users allow us to.
And you have your work cut out for you a little bit, because I think people think energy, they think centralized power plants. You're not going to put up your own thermonuclear reactor in your backyard and create energy. But people forget that energy is consumed at the edges. That can be controlled. And energy doesn't travel super well over long distances. It's hard to load balance local areas, especially as more and more things become electrified,
Yep.
especially mobility, especially servers with AI and increased other digital use cases, whatever it is, Bitcoin mining, whatever. And being able to kind of control that dynamically actually ends up being a pretty huge thing. It needs to be decentralized.
Absolutely.
Obviously people talk about decentralized. Blockchain's a very decentralized thing, but you don't need the blockchain to build decentralized technology. Decentralized technology doesn't need blockchain. But why, in your case, is the blockchain an important component of building Daylight? Not just for a token, but for the actual protocol itself.
Yeah, I think there's a number of reasons. Number one is when you think about decentralized energy networks, they are providing some form of commitment to the energy system in order to extract value from the energy system. So just like, in certain energy markets, for example, there are things that exist called capacity markets. And these are almost like insurance markets from the energy grid itself, where they tell power generators, hey, we will pay you X dollars a month to just be on standby. And then when we need you, we will also pay you a dispatch rate, but you have to be available when we need you. And it's kind of this reserve or insurance for power grids. Distributed energy networks can participate in these capacity markets just like power grids can. But there's a reliability concern from the energy market, because the energy market says you're not just one big centralized power plant that we can meter directly. You are a network of 100,000 electric vehicles in our footprint. How can we trust that these electric vehicles are listening and are reliable and are willing to show up and be there whenever we need it? And so there's all these reliability concerns around decentralized energy networks in the energy system. And so what we're building at Daylight is not just purely this connectivity layer between connected energy devices and energy grids. It's actually economically validated energy capacity that can be delivered when it says it will be delivered. And we'll describe a little bit more about this when we release our documentation in the coming weeks and months. But really what we're doing is building out a proof that we call proof of flexibility that is validating participating nodes on a continual basis to ensure that they have the flexibility that they say that they're providing to the energy system, rather than just getting them to sign up for a network and hoping that they show up on the day when you need them. And the the blockchain elements of this are quite valuable to an end user where they can look on chain and say, all of these nodes are actually being tested in real time. They're being rewarded for providing this continuous validated coverage. And we can look on chain at any time and prove that this is the amount of flexible capacity that the network has to deliver to the energy system. And so I think that's some of the more nuanced, like really interesting pieces of smart contracts, so some of the ZK work that we're doing, validating flexibility and ensuring that it is actually available and economically guaranteed, unlike just a general network where you might sign up and say, yeah, I'll participate maybe if I feel like it. We're really focused around rewarding active and continuous participation.
So is the TLDR on that, my thermostat's set to 72, you guys move it to 74, just to make sure that you can?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah. So
it responded, energy was saved. Okay, we know that we can do this if we need to. You don't get slashed, or you get
that's
an extra reward or something like that.
that's exactly right. And so we actually, the way it works in practice is it's a little bit different for each device type. But in the case of the thermostat, right, you would set the thermostat for 15 minutes, not enough for there to be really any noticeable change in the home, but there would be a 15-minute random toggle on the thermostat. And the energy data off of the meter in the building would stream back to the protocol what the real time change is in energy consumption in the home. And that's matched up against a forecasting model, which our team has developed off of a number of different open source energy accounting, energy efficiency models. It's compared, and if it's in the certain confidence interval of yes, this device responded, and yes, it provided the flexibility that it said it would provide, it's validated, and you would pass that challenge. And so that's at a high level how the proof of flexibility system works.
Yeah, cool. I definitely see, DIMO is inspired by helium. Daylight's inspired by. I can definitely see some of those
Totally,
elements there. That's very cool.
totally.
Um, so coming back to cars a little bit, I've heard a rumor that Daylight will be building on DIMO. What can you tell us about that? Why you would build on DIMO and kind of all the different benefits of doing so?
Totally. Yeah. So Daylight is super excited to build on top of DIMO. Again, with DIMO being such a large inspiration for what we're doing, now kind of coming full circle and building and composing on top of the network that DIMO is building on. In order to power these, energy applications with all these different energy devices, we need connectivity to those devices. So we need integrations with the vehicles themselves in the case of electric vehicles. And DIMO has built a very robust suite of API integrations where we can go in and pull historical charging data, where we can control the charging cycle directly, where the user can set the parameters to communicate with our backend to tell us, you're allowed to touch the vehicle during this time, but it has to be charged by this time. All of those kind of inputs and controls will be pulled through the DIMO API platform. And what's so valuable about that is, number one, from a composability perspective, we're proving out what DeFi has done for so long, which is prove the value of composability in financial systems. We're starting to really pioneer the composability of infrastructure networks, which I think is going to be a very interesting and exciting design space going forward. Number two, not only does DIMO have a set of APIs that we can use, but it also comes with a built-in network of connected users and electric vehicle drivers who are excited to build applications on top of their EVs and allow their EVs to generate value for them. And so not only is it just middleware, in the case of an API infrastructure, but it comes with a very valuable network built in that we can tap into directly and start to build an application directly on top of DIMO's infrastructure stack. Then I think the last piece is just alignment around principles of open source, of decentralization, of returning as much value as possible to the users and owners of these distributed infrastructure networks, ensuring that they can monetize and earn from the value that they're providing back to these networks. So those are all the major reasons why we decided, hey, for the electric vehicle portion of our stack, DIMO is by far the best partner to work with and ensure that we can start using these EVs to support the energy system.
Yeah, I love it. I think there's going to be so many more partnerships like this in our space, in DePIN, and in just crypto generally. You see a lot of composability, kind of the original moment of real tangible composability in blockchain use cases was in DeFi summer when you saw
Totally.
all these protocols building on top of one another, and just the level of resilient connection and the ability to kind of quickly and permissionlessly innovate on them was very apparent with blockchain kind of enabling that. One of the cool, when I think about projects building on top of DIMO, It's funny. I didn't know this was a word. I came across this recently in some podcasts. It's a term called enshittification, and it's the trend of networks as they're owned by centralized entities to become more closed, more controlled, more extractive over time, and get crappier and crappier until they're eventually replaced. And our networks, by their design, are kind of the opposite, where the openness to them and the ability for other people to build and add value to it with other applications and take advantage of the composability has the opposite effect. And so right now, DIMO, we are able to connect a car and get a lot of different data. But as a daylight comes on, now we're getting data from a different type of source. And it may not be that we're providing the charging data, but we're getting other types of data, other types of verification, uh, sort of your proof of ability to control the vehicle, and you're building up more trust in the vehicle based on what it's doing with daylight and other applications. And for the first time, kind of in our sales pipeline conversations, now there's enough people talking about building on DIMO or building on DIMO for us to start to see people coming to us, not just to get access to vehicle data, but to pull in some other application that's building on DIMO. Someone's doing federal EV tax credits based on charging data. You combine that with daylight, you combine that with a fleet application. Now you have a much more robust and interesting thing that's taking advantage of not just features that we've built, but that are being built by everybody in this ecosystem. You start to form a network, and each project like DIMO or daylight becomes a central point or a node in this network where all these other things are connecting into it,
Totally.
and you can build more powerful networks that way. So it's really
And I,
exciting to
I
see
think
that.
for deepens as well, it becomes really interesting whenever like just enrollment in different deepens becomes so simplified where, you know, a daylight app can enroll you both in daylight and DIMO if you have an electric vehicle, and a DIMO app can enroll your DIMO connected vehicle into daylight. And, you know, it's not like you have to break into these different closed end ecosystems. You start to see someone just enter an ecosystem some way, somehow, and now they're exposed to all these other different community owned infrastructure projects that they can enroll their equipment in and start to earn from. I think that's going to be really exciting to see.
Right. Yeah. So what you're referring to is that in the daylight app, you could onboard a car onto DIMO, because DIMO is
Exactly.
not the DIMO mobile app. DIMO is the platform for connecting cars. DIMO mobile is just an app to do that on. And similarly in DIMO mobile, we can have a charging widget for your car where you're enrolling in daylight and other things, and viewing your charging history and all kinds of stuff. And these projects can onboard users to each other's protocols.
Exactly. Because
Yeah.
we're using DIMO's, you know, electric vehicle connectivity stack, as soon as a user enrolls their device and they go into their device card for their EV in the Daylight app, you know, we can have that widget that sits right there that is now, you know, now enroll in, you know, DIMO rewards as well, or whether that's, you know, find someone that's willing to share a hardware device with you or purchase a DIMO hardware device, or in the case of a direct software integration to the DIMO network, you know, you can just plug and play very, very simply. All of a sudden these front ends become, you know, front ends for tons of other different deepen applications. I mean, it might be a little bit of a stretch, but you could imagine some world where like just through one application you can connect your ev to daylight to support the energy grid. You can enroll it into DIMO platform to start sharing energy data and supporting the DIMO connectivity platform. And then like as you drive around, you're mapping like 5G hotspots all from one just central enrollment. And it doesn't really matter where you entered. All those things are just available for you to enroll in. So I think that'd be a pretty cool feature.
Right. Yeah. The pace at which these networks can expand, and the depth of what they can get into when you kind of build them this way, as opposed to, again, the more closed, centralized network type, is going to be really powerful for people. People talk about the ability of DPIN to create the incentives to deploy a network, but it's not just in deploying it, it's in what that openness does for allowing innovation on the network. And
Totally.
typically, if you think about, yes, there's capital efficiency in centralized networks deploying infrastructure, but the incentives for innovation, the ability to innovate, and who's able to help innovate greatly hold them back. So it's really not just a matter of the incentive mechanism, but also kind of what these networks can build. That's going to be really exciting. From a user experience standpoint, people might be hearing us talking about adding cars in each other's applications and thinking, what does that mean? I have the same MetaMask wallet between both, and how is that going to work? And what if they're on different chains? One of the things that's exciting about this era and this upcoming cycle is I think we're going to start to see pretty much every application as table stakes have some type of wallet as a service or smart account style structure with account abstraction. We're very close to implementing that here. And in about a month or so, users will sign in with an email that will generate a signer for them that will control a DIMO smart account with account abstraction. So there's no gas or any confusion there. One way that this can become really powerful is a Daylight account could become a signer on the DIMO account, and you could manage your DIMO car from Daylight. Um, Still, though, there's a bit of fragmentation. There's still some clunky, weird UX stuff. Really, the big divide in DePIN seems to be along Solana versus EVM lines. And as long as two products are on the EVM side, the composability and user experience can be pretty good. Or if they're on the Solana side, their composability and experience be pretty good. Across them is a little bit more difficult. You've chosen to build on EVM. You're building on Base. What went into that decision? Why is EVM the best place for Daylight?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, the first thing to set the table is I think really every, call it L1 or L2 today is performant enough to host a deep in network. I just think like in general, performance at this point is powerful enough to power most of the type of networks that we're building, that you guys are building. And so when people used to make a decision purely based on performance, I think that was a really critical evaluation metric. I think today, performance is getting so good across a number of different chains, and with account abstraction now abstracting away gas payments, or developers can sponsor those directly. I don't see a ton of performance drawbacks whether you're deciding to build on an L2 or an L1, and so that's just table stakes. And so you can start to evaluate a decision along a number of different lines. And when I was evaluating that, there's a few things that were important. Number one is UX and DevX. So how clean is the user experience for our users? Just like you're talking about, can we spin up a signer on initial authorization and never have them have to even think about a wallet or a seed phrase or creating a wallet? Can we connect that signer to a smart wallet where we can sponsor gas payments and abstract away complexities, and ensure they don't have to buy some ETH before they can actually mint an energy device on chain as an NFT? Like, that's a terrible experience. So like, what does the UX stack look like in the ecosystem that we want to build on? I think the EVM actually still leads pretty strongly in that sense. There's so many good UX tools like Privy, like Dynamic on the wallet side, like Coinbase Smart Wallet, and other options on the smart wallet and account abstraction side. And we'll continue to see more innovation there. But another key part of UX is just DevX. And the EVM still by far has the largest network of incredibly talented developers. So from a talent recruitment perspective, you're recruiting from a much broader pool of talent to come in and help you build the network and the protocol that you want to build, which I think is very valuable. And tools like the Coinbase developer platform, the CDP, are becoming really powerful and really developer friendly for paymasters, for actually developing with on-chain kit. It's become really, really simple for teams to go and start building out initial parts of their infrastructure on chain. And so UX and DevX on Base, where we're building, I think specifically are incredible. Number two, it is liquidity. And so how much liquidity exists around the protocol? To date, DePINs haven't done a lot of what I would call like financializing. Like, it's still very much like kind of buy this box, plug it in, and mint tokens. But I can see like many infrastructure projects, DePINs start to financialize in interesting ways in the future, where there could be like actual on-chain pools of capital that are funding hardware deployments or miner deployments. So in the case of Daylight, you could imagine this really interesting pool of capital that's effectively buying solar and storage systems. And then our installation company can go and install solar and storage systems at a very significant discount to homeowners who never have to touch crypto, never have to worry about crypto. And now the pools of capital are having access to the mining rewards. And you start to see some financialization around DePIN. I think that's going to be a really interesting trend over the next 2 to 3 years. And so if you're looking out to the future, you just want to be where the capital is. And capital by far is in the EVM ecosystem. And when you start to evaluate L2s, Coinbase, I think, is now Base is now number 2 in TVL of all the L2s behind Arbitrum. growing rapidly, and they've done it all without any incentives. And so I really like the trend there on the liquidity side. And then the last piece is just community engagement and reach. And I'm willing to take the bet that more and more users are going to come on chain in the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I'm willing to bet that Coinbase is going to be a massive part in bringing users on chain. It's become very evident that that's a core piece of their corporate strategy going forward. And if that's the case, I want my application to exist exactly where they're pointing their users to go first. And for us, it was pretty clear that that's Base. And so when I evaluated where to deploy across those three kind of decision points, it was very evident that EVM and specifically Base was the right place to put Daylight. And we've been incredibly excited for all the support that we've gotten from the Base community, from the Base core team. It's been a great decision. So yeah, that was kind of the rubric for evaluation.
Makes a lot of sense. I like, there's a lot of things that I like about Solana. I'm definitely not a hater. I'm mostly interested in DIMO above anything else, but I
Sure.
can't help but be a little bit biased towards EVM. I was a consensus for 4 years. But kind of as you mentioned on the DevX side, it's not just the fact that there's a ton of audited Open Zeppelin contracts you can just lift off the shelf. It's that a lot of applications are kind of out of the box, ready to work with EVM chains, and undeniably, there's more DePIN on Solana today.
Yep.
And we just kind of earlier we talked about composability among DePIN projects and how our projects can be composable together to great effect. But like you were kind of mentioning as well, the applications that DIMO's most interested in being composable with are on-chain titles, registrations, insurance, auto loans. We want to bring kind of all auto commerce on-chain. We want to be talking to external sensors, traffic lights, so on. Every one of these machines and people in our ecosystem should have a wallet.
Yep.
And right now, as you mentioned, where more of the enterprise will eventually have to kind of bring in these incumbent enterprise companies, and more of them are finding themselves on kind of the EVM side. This could change. We're certainly not closing the door, forever on Solana. Again, I like those guys. I like
Totally.
what they're doing. There's a lot of cool stuff going on over there. But for now, similar thought process for going with EVM.
Completely agree. And I think the other key piece too is like, on-chain composability is great for certain applications, even within DePIN. There's some really interesting stuff to do with on-chain composability, like we're talking about, like the immediate, for instance, daylight borrowing demos, EV NFTs, and being able to use that within our app or the signer within our app. But I think in general, DePINs can also compose with a lot of their off-chain elements. And so just because a project decides to deploy on Solana or a project decides to deploy on Base or on Arbitrum, they can still compose on a lot of the off-chain elements. And so, there's still a lot to do with all the great projects in the Solana ecosystem.
Yeah. To close out, obviously, you can't listen to politics or the news without hearing something about the climate and the need to improve it. Whether you think that we need to make massive sacrifices as a country or not to address it is one thing, but I think everybody would be happy to electrify and clean up the climate, clean up the air, electrify the grid here with renewable energy, especially if we can do so in a commercially viable way. What does it mean to you to be kind of consumerizing clean energy tech, especially with blockchain, which is one of the things historically harder to consumerize anything with?
Yeah. So, I think what's really interesting today, especially in the distributed energy space, is that like a lot of times there's kind of like climate acceleration. It's like it kind of goes hand in hand with like doomerism and like deceleration. But in the case of distributed energy, I actually think like distributed energy is a climate accelerative technology, and also just like a general like tech accelerative technology or economic accelerative technology. And the reason for that is distributed energy today in most places around the world, especially in developed countries, is already cheaper than purchasing electricity from a centralized monopoly utility. It's more reliable in case of coupling storage with your solar system or managing your loads more intelligently. You can increase the reliability, eliminate dependence on the centralized grid, and of course, it's sustainable because I like to call it. Somebody posted a funny tweet about just solar panels being small modular receivers instead of like small modular reactors. There's a giant fusion reactor that shows up every single day, and your small modular receiver can receive that fusion energy and turn it into electricity directly for your home or your building. And so it's inherently climate positive. And so all those things I think are great for humanity. They're great for individuals. It's like sovereign technology to some extent. And it's also great for the climate. And so when you think about how do we lead this transition, what it really comes down to is I think changing what has been traditionally a very supply push market, like run by lots of kind of scammy salesmen running around knocking on door to door, to something that's much more demand pull, where we can use incentives, we can use communities, we can use kind of transparent organizational design to accelerate the deployment of distributed energy and ensure that it can support the expansion of our energy grids going forward. And so that's really kind of the North Star at Daylight is consumerization is actually packaging this in a way that's transparent, that's rewarding, that's engaging, that ensures that users capture the value that they're providing back to the energy system. And it's not leaking to some publicly traded large company, and that they can benefit from all the benefits of distributed energy, which is sustainable, inexpensive, and reliable. And so that's kind of the North Star and how we're packaging everything together at Daylight.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it. It's always good talking to you. Everybody should go download their app. Even if you don't have anything to connect right now, you can test drive it and see what the app would look like if you were to connect. But you should download it and actually connect whatever devices you have. And if you don't, you should go out and buy them and connect it, because why not?
Totally.
And join the future here with them. And of course, download DIMO mobile as well and connect a car to DIMO. But anyway, thanks so much for coming on, Jason. And best of luck. Congrats again on the recent fundraising announcement and the launch. Wishing you lots of success.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Robin. We're excited to team up with you guys to start scaling distributed energy and electric vehicle support of distributed energy. So exciting few months ahead of us.
Great.